What has been going on has been a joint operation, maybe even more than a joint operation in terms of a third or a fourth party. But there are certainly two parties in this. One, of course, is the empire, the United States, but the other, very substantively, is Israel. Israel is there big time. Israel has been there since the first finding in the 2016 year of Trump's first administration. Israel is a part of the intelligence picture, whether it's false, fair, accurate, or whatever. And in most cases, I think it's pretty false. And Israel is a manipulator of the intelligence that Trump is getting. One of the people giving Trump the intelligence is an Israeli citizen, dual citizen, of course, which is what we like to have in this country. But he's an Israeli citizen. He's linked with a former CIA individual who are giving for money Laura Loomer intelligence from Venezuela that they say is accurate, and Trump is turning his face away from the vested intelligence community, starting with Tulsi Gabbard and others, and listening to Laura Loomer. So he's getting his intelligence about Trinidad, about drugs and so forth from a source that's being paid by certain members of the opposition in Venezuela to give him that intelligence. You can't make this up. Israel is a big part of that. And the person who's working with the CIA operative is an Israeli citizen, as I said. You got the Nobel Peace Prize winner, as you said, Machado, who is plugged into it too. I won't go this far, but I will at least surmise that she might be a Mossad asset. So you have all of this going on, and then to come to your question, is any of this really going to overthrow Nicolas Maduro and the government he represents? I don't think so. And I think it's going to be a real disaster if we try to use major force majeure, to do it. Whether we sneak up on it or we frontally assault it, it makes no difference. We're going to get our hands tied in a mess. Think Vietnam, think Afghanistan, think any of the wars that we've been involved. Think Somalia, for example, when we went in supposedly to do humanitarian good and wound up chasing warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid and had to withdraw ignominiously from Mogadishu. That's what we're looking at. And this president doesn't seem to have a grasp of this sort of thing. And he doesn't have a Secretary of Defense in Pete Hegseth who has a grasp of this sort of thing. And he doesn't have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff either. His chairman came from the Pacific Theater, where he was a 3-star general, mostly involved in special operations. And here's another thing that most people don't understand. Way back when Sam Nunn was in the Senate of the United States, Sam Nunn had a burr up his saddle that he wanted to form a special operations command that would put all the special operators, Delta, SEAL teams, 6 and 5 and 4 and 2, the Rangers, the CCT and the Air Force, the Raiders and the Marine Corps. Eventually, the Marine Corps came in, all under a single command, make it a unified command and give it a budget. Well, he did. We all told Senator Nunn he was crazy. Even Colin Powell told him he was crazy. They went ahead and did it. And guess what happened? Now that command has grown up to be so powerful and so integral to U.S. strategy in the world because it's linked to the CIA. The CIA uses the special operating forces in the military for direct action. That way it doesn't have to risk its own people, and it doesn't have to report to its oversight committee in the Congress because it's the military executing the direct action. And what's happening and what caused, I think, Admiral Halsey to say he was leaving early from Southern Command's command is those special operators with their mothership down there off Venezuela. And their mothership is a former cruise ship. It's huge. It's monstrous. It has all kinds of laboratories inside of it, all kinds of intelligence devices. It can land Harriers. It can land helicopters. And what's happening is, without the conventional force commander, Admiral Halsey, commander of Southern Command. It's his region. Without him even having anything to say about it, these special operators operating under Special Operations Command in Florida are, in fact, carrying out these actions against Venezuela. This is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It happened in Mogadishu. When we made the ignominious retreat from Mogadishu, it was because Special Operations Command was going after Mohammed Farah Aidid on their own without the Turkish commander of the UN force or the US commander knowing anything about it. That's what we're doing in Venezuela in spades, I think. I have very strong feelings about this because I've seen it happening. It happened in Afghanistan. It happened in Iraq. It happened, as I said, in Somalia. I think it's happening again. And each time it happens, they grow more and more powerful. So this is another army, if you will, with its Air Force, Navy, and everything else too, within the U.S. military, operating for the CIA and Mossad. And they're doing things like Venezuela. So if you want to see some action in Venezuela, you're probably going to see that kind of action joined at the hip with Machado's people, whomever they are. But I agree with you. The opposition, such as it is in Venezuela, is turning against not Maduro, but turning against the effort of the empire to overthrow Maduro because they see what's happening and they understand what's happening. They understand Machado wants to sell Venezuela to the empire, period. That's what she wants. She's been very straightforward about that. And this isn't going to work. I think we're in for a real mess. But the people who are going to feel the effects of that mess are probably the Venezuelans and maybe the Colombians too, because Trump has turned a nasty eye on Colombia also.
It is known to almost everyone in Venezuela that while there is a debate about the sanctions when it comes to military intervention, the Lopezes and Guaidos and the Machados are all people who lives in Florida or other parts of the United States and not real people living in Venezuela. And I also wanted to add that, as you indicated, that there seems to be division within the military and the intelligence, probably within the military, people who know the reality of Venezuela and those who the partisan hacks and those all the on the payrolls of Mossad and so on. I think the fact is that in Venezuela, the military is extremely politicized. And this is a distinction between, for instance, Chile in 1973, where Allende Salvador didn't go after the military to replace with his own people, which is not the case in Venezuela. So in Venezuela, the military is extremely hooked into the whole Bolivarian process, meaning thereby that any kind of attempt of coup is extremely difficult in Venezuela. And one might disbelieve numbers of millions of militias being recruited. Those 7 million, 8 million might be overstated, I don't know. But it is true that there is a popular consensus, unanimous consensus in Venezuela against U.S. military intervention.
Yes, I'm a student of the Chilean episode with Nixon and Kissinger, and I can tell you it's quite different. The Chilean military was really on our side throughout all those years because we had bought them, essentially. And they knew because we had bought them, if it were a coup that was successful, they would be in charge. And so all they did was fight over who the general would be that would be in charge. A little bit different situation here. We have not been through the School of the Americas or whatever. We have not been up close and personal with the Venezuelan military in any way other than maybe some CIA infiltration and trying to bribe people. That could have happened. I suspect it has. But I don't think they've been very successful in that effort because the military has basically been loyal. So this would be an entirely different operation. You would probably have the bulk of the military, the Venezuelan military, against you from the get-go. That's a very different situation than buying the military out and having them, even as they did in Chile, turn on Allende and produce who they produced, which was not too good for Chile. So I think what we're looking at is a true guerrilla war that we'll lose. And while I would love to see us lose in a situation like that yet again and try to teach us a lesson in terms of those kinds of things, I don't want to see that pain brought on Venezuela or on Colombia or Nigeria or anywhere else, especially not when it's not called for. They are not threat. Here's the fundamental thing. They are not threats to the national security of the United States. Trump and his Justice Department and his Defense Department leap through hoops every day with the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Senate orchestrating their leaps and being very, very supportive of them to substantiate that what they're doing is in the name of the national security of the empire, which is preposterous. Even with Iran, it's preposterous. Iran presents no threat of significance to the empire, unless the empire wants to sit in the middle of the Persian Gulf and wave a flag, which President Ahmadinejad once said to me in New York. Let me see if I've got this right now. Iran owns about 1,875 kilometers of Persian Gulf coastline, and the United States owns how many kilometers? His point, very vivid point. The threat in the Persian Gulf was not from Iran. The threat was from the United States of America. And everybody in the region knew that, even the Saudis and the Emiratis and others. So there is no threat to the national security of the United States from any of these targets that Trump is looking at, with the possible exception of China. And, what are we doing there? That's another issue altogether, but it's a big issue. It's a huge issue. It's a nuclear issue.
I want to actually come to China, but just a side comment on the threat. It reminded me of some of these debates in the 80s about US generals saying that Nicaragua and possibly even Cuba are posing great threats to the United States. And in one of these debates, Noam Chomsky said that it would be a disservice to even Hitler, saying that his narrative that Czechoslovakia was a threat to Germany would be similar to the threat caused by Cuba or Nicaragua to the United States. I mean, even Hitler might have some point when he made a statement about Czechoslovakia. I mean, such is the absurdity of US inventing threats from these small nations. But I think I wanted to discuss China, particularly maybe in the context of Latin America, given one of the reasons why Trump and his ilk, of course, the Secretary of War, who wants to keep doing war to keep his position and job, but Marco Rubio, it's just someone on steroids, just going on and on. There is a huge China factor given the economic ties and relationships with a whole range of Latin American nations, Brazil, Venezuela, even Panama, even Mexico, which is the largest economic partner of the United States. These are China, Latin American nations' economic ties are rapidly increasing. And we have been discussing, you have spoken on our show about the US empire having to wrap up its empire and become a nation state again. And given the recent loss the US faced against China, I mean, it was very confident when it launched its economic warfare, and it had a humiliating defeat. What do you think is the grand strategy of the United States when it comes to China going forward? Is there any reset in thinking of the Stephen Millers and the Manhattan Foundation and all these China hawks? Is there any rethinking and resetting given the humiliating loss they faced recently, or are they continuing down the same path, even designing a nuclear war with China?
I can detect no strategy, none whatsoever. I detect a menagerie of people who think they have a strategy and who can express that strategy from time to time in terms that are almost indecipherable. Steve Bannon comes to mind immediately, and even Pete Hegseth. But I don't detect any grand strategy, nor do I detect a strategy vis-a-vis a bloc of countries or a single country like China. No strategy whatsoever. And back to your point about China, everywhere virtually that China is making inroads, they are doing so because we have screwed it up so badly that people are begging China to take over. That's how awful it is, particularly in the Western Hemisphere. Brazil is a perfect case. China is moving in where it detects weakness and mistakes by the empire, and they are making great headway doing that. You don't even have to quote Sun Tzu. It's not an indirect strategy. It's a strategy of, look there, my major enemy is making gross error after error after error, and I'm flowing into those errors and giving the people some alternatives. That's what's really happening. And it's a sad commentary because I don't think this administration understands that's what's happening to them. I don't think Donald Trump understands that Xi Jinping handed him his rear end in the last meeting they had in China. Handed him his rear end, as in beat him to a pulp. So he comes out and announces that it was a great meeting. I'm sure Xi Jinping thought it was one of the best meetings he'd ever had. Although these people like Putin and Xi Jinping and even Modi and certainly Lula have to wonder. And I think there are a few people in Europe who might be leaders of the future, replacing Starmer, Macron, and all the rest of the idiots over there who detect this too, that what I'm saying is in fact happening. And they're trying to decide, do I want to go whole hog with China? Do I want to be independent? Do I want to be 50-50? What do I want to do? Because I don't want to sell my soul to anybody, even China, but I can't depend on the empire anymore. In fact, I have to fear the empire now. That's what people are thinking around the world. And as I said, increasingly, they're thinking that in NATO, not in the current governments, but in the ones that are going to replace the current governments, which, mark my words, will happen in the next 18 months. Every government will be replaced in Europe. It'll start with France, England, and Germany, but it'll roll like an avalanche over the rest of Europe as they realize 5% of GDP? Are you kidding me? Where's my social programs? Where's my agricultural programs? Where's my free education? Where's my free healthcare? All those sorts of things. That these leaders aren't going to hang around. And that's worrisome because I wonder what Europe's going to do when it really hits. Are they going to go back to the Europe of the 30s, or are they going to form some sort of European security architecture to start with? And is it going to include Russia, for example, as we had contemplated at the end of the Cold War with George H.W. Bush? I would say that's going to be very difficult given what Russia has seen NATO do to it in the past, since 2014, certainly, and even before that. I was just reading a report on the Nazis in Ukraine. Holy mackerel. I mean, they're all over the place. Putin has not eradicated them yet. He's pushed them all up into the remaining sector of Ukraine, and they're all around Zelensky. And Zelensky can't move without these people. He can't move. He can't do anything without them. They'll blow his brains out the moment he decides he wants to do something not in their plans. And there's quite a few of them. I always thought when I was working with Ukraine back in the early 2000s as chief of staff of the State Department, our intelligence was telling us maybe 150,000, maybe somewhere between 100 and 150,000 true Nazis. I'm talking about Bandera's boys. What I saw the other day of the list comes from our own intelligence community, and it's well over 200,000. So this is a pretty formidable force, and they've been husbanding themselves. They've not been going to the front lines to do battle because they know if they do, they'll get killed. So they're staying back in the rear and husbanding their force so they will be the ultimate power in Ukraine, whatever results from the war. And if they are the ultimate power, there will be no peace. There will be no peace. We may have a cessation of hostilities, if you will, but there will be no peace, not as long as these people are there, because they are Nazis, and their motto and their beliefs are Nazi-like. So disaster looming there too. But I think there's another place where Trump hasn't a clue. He has people talking to him, people briefing him that are telling him the untruth about Ukraine and about the situation in Ukraine. No matter whether he wants to go more forcefully in support of Zelensky, he wants to be neutral, or he wants to completely back off. He does not know the truth about Ukraine. And he's the only one, the empire is the only one, sad to say, that really has still the remaining oomph and contact and wherewithal in terms of the Europeans to shut this down. And he's not doing it. So there's no strategy.
What kind of lies is he being told, or are he being told regarding Ukraine, that NATO can still hold on to this war, that Ukraine can still keep pushing the Russians? Are these the kind of lies? What are the kind of lies he is hearing? Because there is a point in time before the summit. I'm talking about President Putin and President Trump summit, Alaska summit, where Trump started echoing the reality when he was talking about loss of Ukrainian forces, the movement of the front, the direction of movement of the front lines, etc., etc. And recently he has stopped talking anything about it. So what kind of lies are being told to him?
Mostly Lindsey Graham and his crew, who are telling him it doesn't matter. What you're doing is you're bleeding Russia, and you want to bleed them to the last drop of blood. And if it costs Zelensky his life, if it costs Ukraine another 100 kilometers of terrain, so be it. You want to bleed Putin to the maximum. And Graham's even telling him that if he does that, in the middle of that, Putin will fall. That's what he's telling him, that Putin is hard pressed. Even when someone comes over that knows what he's talking about and tells the president, as one individual did, I'm told, that Putin is hard pressed, all right, but he's hard pressed by the right. They want him to finish this war, if necessary, destroy Ukraine. Not hard pressed by peaceniks or people who want it to stop. But Trump is not getting the right view. And Graham has, I don't know what kind of hold Graham has on Trump, because really the two men despise one another. It works both ways. They despise one another. But Graham has some kind of hold on him. And it might not just be Graham as Graham. It might be the entourage that Graham leads in the Senate and elsewhere. But they do not want to give Putin a moment's rest. They fear if we give him a moment's rest, he will revive. And they know he's dying. That's what they're telling Trump.
I was following the U.S. escalation on India when those additional sanctions were imposed, and I saw that Lindsey Graham had a tremendous leverage. I mean, I didn't have any direct evidence, but the kind of things Lindsey Graham was saying about restrictions on H-1B, about additional sanctions on India because of buying Russian crude oil for refinery, etc., etc. All of them manifested, or even ultimately Peter Navarro and others started towing the same line and started spilling them in Fox News. And that became the US policy. I mean, long before it was even spoken within the officials in the Trump administration, it was Lindsey Graham and his ilk who was making noises about those kind of policies. So it's not surprising when you were saying that Lindsey Graham must be having some kind of leverage over Trump, despite the two guys hating each other.
I'm being told,
yes.
I'm being told, and when I was first told this, I just tossed it aside. But now I'm having difficulty doing that. That it's somehow wrapped up with the Epstein affair. That so many people have so many holds on other people because of the Epstein affairs. And so a lot of what we're looking at is kind of opaque. You wonder why this happened. You wonder why that happened. And it goes back to years and years of a lot of participation with Epstein in these people's lives. And it's not just the Lolita Express. It's not just, pedophiles and so forth. That's some of it. But a lot of it is the money he wielded and the influence through that money he wielded and the nefarious things that people did with that money. For example, I'm told that Ehud Barak was as participatory in the island process as was Prince Andrew. And we've seen what happened to Prince Andrew. And that doesn't happen very often unless there's some fire there. A lot of smoke, a lot of royal smoke, but there was some fire there. I'm told Barak was as participatory as Prince Andrew was. And there are emails to corroborate that. I'm told Bill Clinton was almost the same. And I go back to Oslo and that moment of sudden stoppage and Arafat caught in the headlights like a deer and wondering what had happened to him. And everything ended, stopped. And I'm being told by people who know what they're talking about normally that there was a little blackmail going on there with both Clinton and Barack. So if those kinds of things have any shred of truth to them, then a lot of what the question you asked about Graham and where's this power coming from has an origin, I think. There are a lot of people blackmailing a lot of people. And Lindsey Graham's not necessarily out of that either, because Lindsey is known to have some problems himself. I won't go into them, but he has some problems. When he says he doesn't have time for sex, he's too busy, there are reasons for that.
My final question, Colonel Wilkerson. I have been looking at developments in Syria, which is partially being reported in the Western press, partially completely brushed aside. But the big picture that I'm getting at is that Syria's inclusion into the orbit of the US and the Zionist empire in the Middle East or West Asia, it is becoming a big factor. I mean, we are already seeing the port of Tartus being stripped of the Russian contracts. It's been given to a UAE company. Then we have other areas being given to France. Then there are reports about foreign fighters who came to Syria to fight the Assad government from all across the region. These are Takfiri, with Takfiri ideologies. They are being mobilized into the Lebanon border to fight Hezbollah, and the Al-Sarraj is now being given incredible reception by Tom Barak and even in Washington. And so I wonder what is the significance of a large country. I mean, to the extent they control the whole of Syria. I mean, they don't control the whole of Syria, but to the extent it's a large, important place. What is the big significance of Syria being included into the this axis of empire? And they are very clear now. They are saying that they would take on the fight to dismantle the axis of resistance. So, what are your thoughts about these developments?
First, I think it's another nail in the coffin of the theory that the lobby owns the empire. Oh, yes, they own the Congress and they own certain politicians more than others. And they own a lot of the billionaires who are Zionists themselves, Christian or otherwise. But the real reason Israel exists is to be our attack dog in Southwest Asia and in the Levant, period. So what's happening is, and it's all connected now, and I said I didn't see any strategy. There is one place where I see a very dangerous strategy developing for the Palestinians. I wouldn't say it was a bad strategy in terms of its possibility of being completed successfully, but it's bad for the Palestinians. And let's just back up to where it starts. It starts with this UN Security Council resolution that we are pushing now on its third iteration, which will, if passed and not vetoed by China or Russia, it will bless taking over the region for Trump's plan. Let's put it that way. However, that plan plays out with Jared Kushner making tons of money or whatever, but it will guarantee it because it will put colonial powers,
The new
you know,
mandateers.
yeah, you know who they are in the region to keep the peace, right? And the Palestinians will disappear. Oh, there'll be some rhetoric about a state sometime somewhere out there, but they'll disappear. Into this place the fact that Israel is in existential peril right now. It is falling apart. The IDF is falling apart, falling inward on itself. More suicides than anyone would ever dream the IDF would have. More post-traumatic stress, more AWOLs, more people not showing up for duty. And yet, Netanyahu wants to take on Iran, and he also wants to get rid of Hezbollah. Well, he's made a deal with Trump, I think. And the deal with Trump is that if I take care of Hezbollah and at the same time work the way you want me to work against Syria and keep Erdogan out, and Erdogan's got his own problems, otherwise he would already be in, I think, big time, and solidify the whole region in the way that you want me to, then you will take on Iran for me. And I don't know that Trump has okayed that or not, but that means Israel wouldn't even be involved in this second go at Iran, if you will, but the United States would do it all on its own. And I don't know what that means other than air power, because I know we don't want to put troops on the ground, but I also know as a military professional, air power won't do it. And so we're looking at a couple of developments in the region that really frighten me, because they could lead to use of a nuclear weapon. I even heard a conversation the other day that went something like this. Well, if Netanyahu just finished off Iran with a few nuclear weapons, most of them launched from submarines on cruise missiles, which he has the capacity to do now, I understand. And if the United States backed him up with whatever it needed to do to make sure that everything happened the way it was supposed to happen, and we brought the colonial powers back in, and we had everything we had in the beginning, as it were, and it were all owned by us and our friends, we'd be a lot better off. And Israel would be a lot better off. We could rebuild Israel. We could put it back in as a Jewish state. I think its future as a Jewish state is really seriously questionable right now. But they want to recreate all that, and they're going to do all of that. I said in another 3 years, because that's all Trump's got left. And the answer I got was, it won't be another 3 years. I don't know if they meant they could do it inside the 3 years. No, I think they meant we're not leaving in 3 years. And I don't know if that meant Vance will be president then and carry everything on for another 8 years, or it means we're not leaving, period.
When we had a glimpse of that situation earlier in 2020. So good
Yes.
luck with that. We'll leave it there, Colonel Wilkerson. This was a very helpful conversation, and thank you so much for your time.
Let me just make one other comment, if I may.
Of course.
That event that you just referred to failed in many respects because it did not have the United States military behind it. They are painstakingly recrafting the United States military so it won't do that again.
Right. That's full takeover of the state as it is understood, either in the far right or the far left circle. We'll leave it there. Thank you again, and this was a good conversation after a while
Take care.
with you.